Hello, everyone, and welcome to my presentation on the decision-making experience of parents of young children. My name is Susanne Kirchner, and I am a second-year PhD student in the Human-Centered Design and Engineering Department at the University of Washington. So while I'm not a parent myself, I'm a aunt to 7 nieces and nephews, and I've worked as a nanny, so the topic of parenting is very close to my heart. And through that experience, also, I've seen that parenting comes with many demands, especially in a world where we have a lot of information and expectations around parenting. And so I was really interested in how parents are handling decisions that they might have to make on a regular basis. We often think about decisions as big decisions, but what about the small decisions that parents have to make on a regular basis? I've looked into some of the research, and there is a lot of background research on how parents are using online resources, and it's mostly to meet their emotional information needs. What's also interesting, there's some research on how parents are using intuition when it comes to making decisions in a clinical context, but it's unclear on how that translates to everyday decision making. And most of the research on health technologies has focused on monitoring and sharing information, but not necessarily on how that information is incorporated in a decision making process. And it also became clear to me that information is only one part, but decision making is a whole process. And parents have to go through not just once, but multiple times on their journey towards parenting. And so I asked myself the following research question. The first one was how and why parents make health decisions on behalf of their children in everyday life. So I wanted to understand that area a little better, and then also see what opportunities there might be to support parents in decision making. So the first step, I conducted an online survey with 65 parents across the US. And wanted to understand both decisions from 3 different health domains: sleep, nutrition, and well-being, and one decision they were able to tell us freely, whatever they wanted to talk about. And I wanted to understand these both qualitatively and quantitatively, so both throughout describing the process of making the decision and what kind of resources they used, but also how many resources they used and how helpful they were. And in addition to that, I also wanted to understand a little bit about their decision-making style and how comfortable they felt with using intuition. And so for qualitative data, we used thematic analysis following Brown and Clark's framework. And for descriptive statistics, we mostly used Spearman correlation. And so the results are organized from the survey basically around kind of what kind of different types of decisions parents made, but then also mostly focusing on the use of resources. And the decisions parents described really varied considerably, which also made it very clear to us that it's hard to design resources for decisions because they are so different in their quality. And so even if you just think about the domain of sleep, parents talked about using technology to fall asleep, if they should bed share with their child or not, and then how to establish sleep routine. But we saw across the different types of resources that we asked parents about, that parents tend to use a variety of resources and usually a lot of resources, but they were very consistent across the different decisions they made. And I want to point your attention specifically to how much they said they relied on intuition. But we see from this quote that intuition is only one part of the different resources. So this mother, for example, said that she doesn't have much of her own family, and the father of the child is not any help, so she relied a lot on herself, her intuition, and Facebook parenting groups. So here we see that it's usually a combination of different resources, and intuition might just be one of it. So we really wanted to understand this a little better, which is why we conducted a second study, this time interviews, where we added the following research questions. We asked how parents perceive the role of intuition in their decision-making process, and therefore we conducted interviews with 12 parents from the greater Seattle area, and this time specifically asked them about easy and hard decisions. and asked them about the resources they use and the decision-making process. Why did we ask easy and hard decisions? Well, because we thought it might be interesting to see if there are different decision-making processes, if intuition might play a different role or different resources. And because we didn't want to give parents a specific definition of intuition, which we saw was one restriction from our survey, we really wanted to have them share their understanding of intuition. And therefore, we used the New Metaphors design toolkit, where we basically gave them a prompt of what intuition means to them through sharing with images and different descriptions. So on the picture you see, for example, reflections. So this time again, we used Brown and Clark's approach to thematic analysis to analyze the data. And we really were able to add a rich understanding of parents' use of resources, mostly focusing or finding insightful information about parents' collaborative experience, but also how they use information, external expertise, as well as intuition. But we also were able to find some factors that we saw affecting parents' experience of decision-making. But given the time restrictions, I'm only going to share some insights about the information and external expertise and intuition. So not surprisingly, we saw that parents really wanted to seek external validation and wanted to be well-informed, sometimes even describing the internet as an anonymous insurance and saying that parents have so much information available to them. But at the same time, they were really looking for that real-world advice and wanting to understand what other parents in similar situations are doing. But at the same time, we saw that parents were getting into this information dilemma. They were either overwhelmed by information, one mother describing it as getting bombarded, or not having enough. So that was really an interesting tension that we saw emerge from the data. And with the experience of intuition, we saw parents describe very different levels of comfort. And some of them said, well, it comes with a lot of expertise and experience. And for others, it also said, well, it always depends on what other perspectives, if intuition is in conflict with other perspectives. For example, this father describing that his now 2-year-old son had a choking incident when they were starting to feed him solids, and basically saying how his intuition, or he said that, well, he's 2 months premature, and we started feeding him solids essentially when the literature felt that he could eat solids. My intuition was he wasn't ready, but we did it anyways because the doctor said to do it. My intuition would have said if we had waited like a month, everything would have been just normal because he was 2 months early. So we see that there's often this tension between expert advice and what parents feel their intuition tells them. But another finding that we saw emerge from the data is that intuition is used at different points of the decision-making process. So it can either be a trigger to even start the whole decision-making process, or it can be a final decision-maker if parents have equally good solutions or like ideas for making a decision. But it also can be context dependent. So life and death decisions, parents feel less comfortable, but sometimes intuition is also the only resource they have available. And so we asked ourselves, what can we do? And here's a summary of some of the key findings. And in terms of parents wanting support to access real-world advice, we really encourage designers and researchers to look into how to facilitate longitudinal relationships to other parents, or how to especially supplement scientific data with elements of storytelling or narrative, personal narratives, as that can make this information very relatable to parents. At the same time, decision-making is a lot of work, and so there are ways that parents, for example, can benefit from information being aggregated, but also to include reflective design of critical thinking. So parents don't just have to consume a lot of information, but they get support in how to consume it. And another point that makes decision-making so effortful is because parents have to go through an iterative process. And so designers and researchers can really look into how to support that iterative process. And lastly, the whole topic around intuition and decision making is can be very fruitful to explore more, especially in how to incorporate intuition in research methods and technology design, and how to support parents in forming and developing intuition, especially alongside more analytical decision making approaches. And so every study has limitations, and so also for our study, we would encourage and also plan to consider more cultural and socioeconomic factors, for example, in the recruitment, but also explore in the moment experiences. Our data like methods very retrospective, as well as include parents in actively designing some of those support tools. And another angle that we want to explore more is include their perspective of experts. And so I thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoy reading the paper. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.